you're with us today. We have a lot to talk about on a case that really stunned our community, Greg, back last fall, and that is the murder of Savannah Copeland, 13 years old. Her body was found on a trail in a Powell neighborhood, and Greg, a 15-year-old Malachi Harris is charged in her murder. That's where we are right now.
This murder, this homicide, riveted not only the Knoxville community, especially the Powell area, but also the East Tennessee, because you have a 13-year-old who was a very active student, somebody that excelled, someone who really was very involved in the community, was apparently, sources say, lured to a public area, a neighborhood swimming pool, and was viciously stabbed multiple times with a pocket knife until she was deceased.
And a few moments ago, we showed you the video of where her body was found. There was a cross there not long after. It was a makeshift memorial. Here is the area. And I talked to her dad just not long, just a week or so after her murder. And he said, you know, we knew the suspect. We knew the suspect. He couldn't say too much, but he said we knew him and felt that this person was headed down the wrong way, you know. But who knows what transpired in the hours, and that's going to come out in court. We know some of the things, that she got a phone call, met him in a swimming pool area, and then she was murdered. So we don't know what led to that. Was there an argument? Was there a fight? Did this kid have some mental issues? And just have so many questions.
And two things that really riveted the community was, one, the vicious nature of the attack.
With a pocket knife.
With a pocket knife, multiple stab wounds to her torso, around the facial area. And then the age of the individuals involved. Savannah Grace Copeland was only 13 years old. The other individual, 15 years old. So this case has been charged and remains, as of yesterday, in juvenile court here in Knox County.
And we're going to talk more about what happened in court yesterday as this case begins to wind its way through the legal system in our next segment. But now we want to welcome with us Senator Becky Duncan Massey. Thank you so much for taking time to join us. And, you know, when we were talking about all this happening in court yesterday, lawmakers with a bill co-sponsored by you were talking about this young lady. You had this young lady on your mind, passing an act in her name. Tell us what this act entails and who this is for.
Well, thank you, Lori and Greg, for inviting me to join you today. Sorry I can't be with you in person. I'm actually getting ready to drive back to Knoxville here in just about an hour. So back to God's country. But yes, it was obviously a horrific case. I mean, well, Savannah, I just can't imagine the pain and that her family and friends have gone through and are continuing to go through. But basically, this bill, named in her honor, in her memory, is to increase funding for our child advocacy centers, the 32 child advocacy centers across the state that work with children that have either been abused or trafficked or victimized in different ways, to try to help them to heal and to be able to live successful lives and to get past it. And I think this would hopefully keep something like this from happening to another beautiful young child.
All right, Becky, thank you so much. And a lot of people were asking, you know, could this bill essentially help both of the people in this case? Yeah, maybe prevent it from happening if you could reach out to someone who is troubled.
Right. Well, I mean, the Child Advocacy Center really does work a lot with kids that have been victimized. But oftentimes people that are victimized end up they victimize other folks as they grow older. And so you know, we want to break the cycle and get the kids the help they need. You know, they call it adverse child experiences, but there's definite science there that shows that if you can give them, the loving, compassionate care they need to get past these horrific events that should not be happening to our children. And oftentimes they're from a family member that perpetrates it on these kids. And then they tend to, oftentimes it's not unusual for them when they are indeed parents to do something similar. So it just kind of, the cycle continues.
Duncan, again, I want to reiterate our thanks and heartfelt pleasure for having you here. But, having been where in juvenile court where this case took place and dealing with this on a daily basis, I think you should be applauded for trying to prevent future crimes with juveniles, because all too often we see when a juvenile has a vacuum, a one-parent family, or they have facilitators, they turn to gangs and substances. And let me ask you this, was this an original bill or was it modeled after legislation in other states?
Well, it basically is trying to correct the funding gap that has developed, because oftentimes, in a lot of different fields, the state contracts with organizations to serve, like our child advocacy centers, to help serve these vulnerable kids, but then they don't give increases each year, cost of living. So one stat that I thought was pretty interesting was that in this year, they're getting about $89 per child served, but in 2021, they were getting $350 per child served. And so that the dollar has, with inflation, it's gone down, but they haven't really had any increases in 25 years. So this was a large funding bill that through a lot of work. I mean, we had 22 senators and 51 House members signed on as co-sponsors. And so it had wide support there. But getting a $5 million recurring amount, it's easier to get $5 million for a one-time expense, but to year after year to kind of update how much they're getting paid for forensic interviews, and then the base funding for each of the 32 centers. And then if the revenue continues to grow at the state at least by 1%, there would be another 3% increase in that given year. So it's trying to fix it going forward.
Yes, and again, we appreciate that as a community. And let's talk more specifics. You touched on a couple of things, but for people watching from home, how would this change what's happening at those advocacy centers?
Well, the staff are doing great work, but it's hard work, and you can easily have burnout. And if you're not being paid what really you need to be paid to do the work you're doing, you would have more staff turnovers and actually being able to fill all the positions. So hopefully the funding piece will give for them to be able to recruit qualified staff and retain those staff. And so that, because oftentimes those staff that are working with those kids, you don't want them mid-cycle. It'd be like changing a lawyer mid-cycle in a trial. You don't want to disrupt that services that they're giving these youth. And so I think it just will help give more stability and reliability of the staff that are out there doing that hard work day in and day out.
Well, Senator, let's go. Have you had a chance to speak with her parents?
I actually haven't. I worked closely with Eddie Smith, who actually brought us the legislation, and we worked real closely together. We did have another victim that testified in our committee that had gone through child abuse and overcome it. And so, but I have not had a chance. I hope to be able to meet with him once I get back in Knoxville.
All right. Senator Becky Duncan Massey, thank you so much. Did you have anything more for her, Greg?
No, again, I just want to reiterate, thank you for everyone involved in the criminal justice system, because we need more methods to prevent juvenile crime, and this is a huge step forward, and thank you for your leadership.
Well, thank you for all that you're all doing. And if you have any great ideas of other things we can fix, just holler. We'll get together and we'll make something else happen too.
Oh, we
Come on back to
appreciate
God's
it.
country.
Yes,
I
safe
will.
travels.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone, that was Senator Becky Duncan Massey talking about the Savannah Copeland Act. It's now awaiting the governor's signature, and it's expected to, of course, receive his full approval. All right, stay with us, everyone. We're going to talk more about this case as it winds through the court system. One of the questions is, why is it taking so long? We'll address that when we come back. Stay with us. Back, everyone. If you've been with us since 2:30, we were just talking with Tennessee State Senator Becky Duncan Massey about the Savannah Copeland Act, a proposal now waiting the governor's signature, which will provide more money to child advocacy centers to deal with mental health issues with many of our young people, in the hopes of preventing such a crime that happened to this young girl back in October. She was stabbed repeatedly, and our hearts go out to her parents. Her dad, Michael, who we've gotten to know, just talked yesterday about this act named for his daughter. Let's listen.
With children who have suffered traumas of some kind at early ages, we need to get to them at early ages, and we need to give their family members support so that these kids hopefully can get the necessary love, support, education, and mental health, access to mental health that they need so that we don't lose them.
So we'll be following this act named for this young girl who had high hopes of becoming a college-level cheerleader, enjoyed art, had a bunch of good friends, but instead lost her life at the age, again, of 13. And it's heart-wrenching to speak with her dad. We're going to hear from her mother in just a moment. But Greg, a lot of people have been asking, after watching our coverage of the case yesterday, that we heard that this isn't probably going to go to trial, or decisions aren't going to be made about whether to try this young man as an adult. We won't know much until January.
And again, this case is in juvenile court, and it's much less public than a criminal courtroom in adult court. The Knox County DA's office signaled in November that they were going to seek a transfer to have this individual tried as an adult.
Let's talk about what happens in a transfer hearing.
Well, Harris is charged with second-degree homicide. That is a knowing killing of another. It's a very serious offense. It's a Class A felony that carries 15 to 25 years in adult court. But as it stands now, with Harris in juvenile court loses jurisdiction when a child turns 18, and under some circumstances, it can be extended for 1 year to being 19. So obviously, those prosecutors don't want to lose jurisdiction of this case. So Tennessee has a transfer statute for serious crimes, and that means that even though you're a juvenile, you can be tried in adult court if certain criteria are met. You have to be a certain age, which Harris would fit. It has to be a very serious offense. Second-degree murder, homicide, obviously is one that our legislature said is a transferable offense. And again, the mandate in juvenile court is the concept of parens patriae. That means what's in the best interest of the child. Well, when you have a case this serious, that narrative gets kind of flipped. And instead of focusing on are there treatment options available, you start to focus on the seriousness of the offense. Was it an offense involving serious bodily injury? So that's why you see prosecutors, especially in a case like this is the poster child for a case that needs to be transferred, in their opinion, to adult court.
Right. And you know, you're no stranger to this. You have represented young people before who are accused of serious crimes. How do you deal with them differently than you would an adult?
And here's there are two things. One, you focus on probable cause. Did your client commit the offense? And in a homicide case, can they prove the requisite mens rea? It's not a premeditated plan charge, that would be first, but a knowing killing. So you want to explore what's in that juvenile's mind. So what the transfer hearing is typically you're using experts, psychologists, psychiatrists, to say, is there expert services that would tend to keep this case in juvenile court to help the child? Can he be rehabilitated?
Do you look at what led to this, with obviously the child's background?
Absolutely.
Family.
And we don't know everything because it's a juvenile proceeding,
Right.
but typically in reading the tea leaves, I would say that you have this individual, Harris, being evaluated, you have experts being involved, and that's probably the reason for the delay. And then once you, as a defense lawyer, hire your team of experts, then the state gets to have their evaluators. So when someone such as Judge Irwin hears this case, he's going to look at, is there probable cause? That means, is it more likely than not that Harris committed this horrific, knowing killing of another? But let's look at all these other factors. How did Harris get here? And, Lori, we hear from victims, and I hear from victims all too often in courtrooms, and justifiably so. You can see people's, the people that are heartbroken, people that are angry, and that anger and that emotion spills out. But it's really interesting because these victims tend to mirror the purpose of the Savannah Grace Copeland Act that Senator Duncan talked about. And they're saying that, they want juveniles that are troubled, abandoned, that need forensic services to have those resources. So in reading between the lines, and I'm never going to endeavor to speak for a victim, but to me it seemed like they wanted this kid fixed before he ever lured their 13-year-old daughter to the pool in Powell, Tennessee.
Let's talk about the difference between second degree and first degree, and the fact that a pocket knife was used. That is so horrifying and terrifying to think about what this young girl went through, being stabbed so many times with a little pocket knife.
It is, and again, we're looking at the view from Google Earth,
Yeah.
but from reports, it would appear that she was lured to a meeting in late at night or early morning hours at this public neighborhood pool area. So, to me, if I'm the prosecution, I'm going to kind of struggle during this transfer process as to whether this was, here's first degree murder, and it's a big change. First degree murder is a premeditated, planned killing of another, and if you're convicted, that's 52 years. Second degree is just a knowing killing of another. Basically no planning. It can be in the heat of passion, it could be a fight, it could be whatever, but you intended the consequence of your actions. But the difference, 52 years versus 15 to 25 years. So, that's something that I think if you are the defense team, you have to pay particular attention as to what was the dynamic of the phone call or calls that led to the meeting or her being lured to the pool. And did he plan to take her, did Harris plan to take Savannah Grace Copeland's life when she met Savannah Grace Copeland? Or was it something that just happened spontaneously?
Go haywire?
Yeah, so, those are questions that may or may not be answered as this case winds its way through the juvenile system.
Rumors. We're not going to report rumors, obviously. And
Absolutely.
a lot of this will come out in court.
But when you see a serious case and you have mental health issues, that's what you see with a delay. And if you're the defense, you want to give this time to play out, and you really want to delve into the mens rea or the intent of your 15-year-old. But, again, as we said at the beginning, what really struck this community is two things: the horrific nature, the violent nature of this crime, and the age of these victims,
so
15 and 13. Typically you see people that are innocent, dreaming to be college cheerleaders and things like that. But, really, Senator Becky Massey and the rest of the legislators that got behind this act should be applauded, because not frequently enough in the criminal justice system do we see politicians want to allocate resources toward prevention. What we see is let's lock them up another decade,
Right.
or let's do this. Very reactionary. But when you prevent a crime, it speaks volumes. And
let's hope lives can be saved through this.
On both ends.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Senator Massey, Becky Duncan Massey, said it very well. If a juvenile has been victimized, then they have a risk of re-victimizing others. So,
Hurt people hurt people. We hear that all the time.
yeah,
And it
it's
bears out in court.
a vicious cycle, but that should be, if there's something good that can come out of something horrific, maybe the Savannah Grace Copeland Act will save some lives.
And we're going to hear from her mother coming up in just a moment. Her parents, I think, understand that this is going to take some time, although it's got to be so tough to wait. We're going to hear from her when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. We've spent the last 25 or so minutes bringing you up to date on developments in the Savannah Grace Copeland murder case. And it was so interesting, and they probably maybe planned it this way, I don't know, but state lawmakers got together, had a vote yesterday on the Savannah Grace Copeland Act, which, as we've been talking about, provides more money to advocacy centers in each of the judicial districts in Tennessee, on the very day that there was another hearing for the young man who's charged in her brutal murder.
Right, and very ironic, but very appropriate. And it's really significant that legislatures have passed a funding bill for child advocacy centers. And most people don't know, unless you have a troubled child or a youth, what they do.
In the system.
And they do a lot. And when someone has been victimized, they offer forensic services, they offer counseling, they offer help, and hopefully they can treat the problem so it doesn't manifest itself where you have crime begetting crime and a cycle of violence. But
and a family like the Copelands.
Yeah, and
I can't even imagine.
their comments, the father's comments were so poignant and so spot on. Let's identify and treat children so they can be saved, so they don't hurt others. And the fact that this bill, who wants to give money to criminals? I mean,
right.
Nobody. But that they have a $5 million tag, an allocation that is repeated. So there will be perpetual funding for these child advocacy centers. And, oftentimes, children don't have a voice. They can't go to Nashville and lobby if you're a victimized juvenile. So,
they need an advocate.
But,
many times they don't have someone to advocate
rarely
for them.
in the criminal justice system. Sometimes we think a victory is when a jury says not guilty. But other times, I think we see a victory when out of something horrific or unfortunate, something good and resources to prevent future crimes happens. And I think that's what we're seeing with this Savannah Grace Copeland Act.
Absolutely. And you talked about her dad, Michael, who we have talked with. We haven't heard much from her mother, Amanda, until yesterday. And we talked about, our reporter Ella Wales talked to her about the waiting game, waiting to see this through until the date of trial. Let's listen to what she had to say.
I can't even express the amount of support we have gotten, from the blue lights to thoughts and prayers to well wishes. Like, it has been overwhelming and it's been beautiful.
She also said in a previous interview with us, also in that same time period from yesterday, that she knows it's going to be a while. And she said, we're going to wait this out. It's worth it for them to get everything right. And so you alluded to that as far as what goes into a transfer hearing, all the things they need to do to look into the suspect's background, run through different tests, all the things that have to happen so that you have a fair trial.
And sometimes, and obviously not these victims, but people lose sight of is the fact that prosecutors want the case tried correctly, error-free, so it doesn't come back, and victims get closure. And homicide cases have a lot of witnesses, a lot of moving parts, especially with a juvenile case. But this case is moving forward, and I will predict that it will either be resolved or transferred to adult court once they get to that final date.
Now, what do you mean resolved?
Well, I mean, it's possible to negotiate a plea agreement.
Deal?
Yeah. So, it really depends on what the experts reveal.
We'll be watching and we'll be talking about it. Let's
We
talk
shall.
more at 5:30, shall
Let's
we?
do.
All right. Thanks for being with us.